Hello and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. I am Brian Kelly, the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan.
And I'm Sarah Miller, Vice President of Marketing and Strategic Communications for SBAM. And as always, we want to make sure to thank our generous sponsor, Marana Group, a data document and distribution company in Kalamazoo. So I know you all are used to seeing Brian in various locations, but we're actually both on location today at the My Hidden Talent Workshop at MSU's Kellogg Center. And I'll let Brian share a little bit about how the day is going.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. It's one of my favorite days of the year. So one of the things that SBAM does each year is put on a conference, a workshop, kind of a how-to practical tools and strategies to be more effective in hiring people with disabilities. And we had a sellout audience, so filled up the room, as many as we could that we could put in a room that size, and it was great to see because it's an indication that that first of all that the previous work that we've done is building, but also all the need for people is creating a new opportunity for some who haven't really had great opportunities to be a part of the workforce in the past. So this is a really great day, awesome program. We'll come back on Thursday and we'll share some of the information, what was learned, what was shared, and where we expect that work to go from here. I was also going to mention, oh, by the way, so at Michigan State, go green. We saw that Tom Izzo and the Michigan State Spartans were not surprisingly back in the NCAA tournament, and Michigan State now holding the longest active streak of NCAA tournament invitations at 24 years in a row. Pretty incredible. That goes back so far that it goes back to when right around the time I graduated from Michigan State University. Really awesome to see. Another thing I wanted to mention was a congratulations to something that was mentioned today, which is that Rob Fowler, former CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan, was just announced as the next CEO of Public Policy Associates (PPA) in Lansing, a very long-standing firm that does it's like a think tank public policy development, long history, very respected, and Rob starting there is pretty awesome. Actually, I don't think he ever really intended to fully retire when he left SBAM, and as I think I maybe said on his final days, I assume that Rob will totally flunk out of retirement, and he has. Maybe gas prices inspired him to go back to work. I don't know. So Rob is starting in that position on the 1st of July, but already working his way into it. So congratulations, Rob Fowler.
Yes, congrats to Rob. Definitely failed at retirement, but I was not surprised either to hear his news. So speaking of employment, Brian, new data shows that employment is up in Michigan. What are the numbers there?
I felt kind of bad with last week. I felt like it was just all bad and heavy news. And around the country and around the world, there is a lot of difficult things that are happening that are impacting small businesses. But there's a lot of demand and a lot of growth that is still happening. The big constraint is finding enough people in order to take advantage of everything that is out there. But we saw employment numbers rise. And they have been several months now in a row of rising. So the jobless rate, or the unemployment rate, down to 4.9%. That it's about 9/10 below or above the national average of 4%. So that gap is getting a little smaller. We saw total employment in the state rise by 11,000 people. So not exactly setting any records, but it's not just the 1 month, but the several months in a row of modest increases in the right direction. So I think it's a really good sign that the recovery is taking hold. Now, I feel like I always have to put the caveat that there's a lot of risks out there with respect to our economic recovery, but very welcome news that when total employment rises, it means that employers at least 11,000 more were able to find people to fill the needs that they have. So overall, a very strong and consistent trend over the last 5 or 6 months.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about tax cut proposals. We've discussed the various proposals on the show before, but new signals from the governor seem to indicate that she might veto those.
Yeah, so I would say that on the two proposals that are very likely to land on her desk, one of them is already there, which is the income tax cut. She's been pretty blunt that that's going to get vetoed. So moving the rate from 4.25% down to 3.9. The legislature's plan would double the retirement income exemption and add a child tax credit. So she said straight away that that was not sustainable and that it was going to be vetoed. On the gas tax, it's been less directly clear. She had some comments last week that made it that I take as signaling a veto, but not outright promising it. And what that tells me is that there's still some little inkling, like holding back and being blunt. It's very likely to pass anyway and land on her desk. It'll go through the Senate this week, but whether or not it actually comes to a veto is, I would say there's like a small percentage chance that it won't be, but given the comments last week, it looked to me like it probably would be vetoed. One other thing I meant to mention on the employment numbers, by the way, is that the Bureau that does these labor statistics, well, it showed total employment going up. It also showed that this switching between jobs has slowed down significantly. So there are a couple of different forces that had made things very difficult in the last year or so. More than a higher than average retirement rate, contraction of the overall labor force participation rate, people with kids, especially women, exiting the workforce at levels that were higher than normal. But then there was this thing called the Great Resignation, where people were not necessarily leaving the workforce, but leaving whatever it was that they were doing for a living. And so that was happening on top of everything else. And so this transient impact was pretty difficult to deal with. So the data did suggest, according, again, I don't know exactly how they determined this, but the data did suggest that people moving between jobs has slowed significantly too, which just tells me that this kind of migration of people, maybe filling positions that people retiring had left open, that a lot of that has kind of run its course. So another good sign that things, might feel a little bit better in the future, but I don't want to oversell that because our labor force participation rate is still low. Demographics are still very challenging. I think for the foreseeable future, finding and hiring people is going to be difficult. But this one factor of people switching jobs, resigning one but staying in the workforce, is maybe kind of run its post-pandemic course and is starting to settle down a bit.
All right. And while we may not see some relief in terms of tax cuts right now, we are going to be receiving $400 payments per insured vehicle. Now, this was previously announced, but the mechanism for getting those payments into the hands of Michiganders began last week. So can you cover the details for us?
Yeah, and this one of the questions that has come up several times is, are people asking, hey, I've got a fleet of vehicles, or I've got a company car. Does this rebate of $400 per vehicle, does it apply to business vehicles? The answer is yes. It doesn't matter who insures the vehicle, but the vehicle, every vehicle has when you insure it, there's a portion that goes to the Michigan Catastrophic Claims Association trust fund, and that's where these rebates are coming from. Back in 2019, a big change happened in auto insurance, which capped the benefits and the rates of reimbursement of benefits out of this catastrophic claims fund for auto insurance. And so when the actuaries that determine how much is needed to help people that are in accidents were recalculated, and it showed a big surplus in the fund. According to law, that surplus was supposed to be mailed out later on this summer, but it's already started this spring. So whether it's your individual vehicle or your company vehicle, if it's been insured in Michigan, you should get $400 per insured vehicle that comes back. Some people have actually already received these checks, and it'd be, in my case, for example, I have three vehicles that I pay for insurance on, and so there'll be $400 per vehicle that I would expect at some point in the next month or so, because they're not doing them all at the same time, but expect to get through them all by April, that we would receive those checks. Now, there's a whole political debate that SBAM has never been involved in behind this, which is, what are the minimum required levels of insurance? And so in its whole history, our association has never viewed it as an issue like a small business public policy issue directly. Obviously, it affects all people, but kind of broader than the focus that we get involved in typically. But I thought it would make sense to just share a little bit behind this debate, where you've got ratepayers and then you've got those who are insured and are providing and have been seriously injured and are providing benefits or receiving benefits by providers all throughout the state. Those providers have had their reimbursement rates cut, in some cases as much as 45%. That's why the actuaries show there's all this extra money, because the amount that the providers are getting for reimbursement is down. There's a big debate on whether or not that's right. Some people say, hey, the providers were charging too much. Others say, yeah, maybe there's bad actors, but these are important services. And so that debate continues today. But this bipartisan demand for excess funds to be sent back to ratepayers, the governor is happy about it. The Republicans in the legislature that passed the bill originally in 2019 are happy about it. This bipartisan effort to move money out of that fund back into people's hands, that it really does make the possibility to go back and change things a lot smaller. So insurance companies are really happy to get the money out of the fund and back into the hands of people, because they know that it kind of locks in the public policy close to where it is today, which is how they would prefer it to be. So it's a little bit of background behind it. The quality of benefits that you get if you're in a serious accident are different than they were before, but also the cost of the insurance and the rebates coming back are lower as well. I should also say that when I say the quality will be different and benefits have been scaled back some, Michigan still does offer the most extensive in the country compared to other states, and small business owners who have vehicles in their fleet or just your personal vehicles, you should expect that you will get a rebate check. Could come today, but sometime in the next 4 to 6 weeks, I would expect that entire thing to have run its course.
All right, thank you for that. So on Friday, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services released updated isolation and quarantine guidance. I'll be honest, it's been kind of hard to keep all the changing rules straight. So can you give us a rundown of what those rules are now?
Yeah, so they're really more like guidance that the Department of Health and Human Services are saying, if you're in a county with medium or low transmission or spread risk, that they're no longer advising for mask wearing, or in most cases, and even backed off within schools and daycare centers with the isolation expectations with symptoms or a positive test. So if you're in an industry such as public transportation or healthcare, you'll see that there are plenty of there still are the same types of rules that you've had right along the way. However, for almost everybody else, between the CDC and the Department of Health and Human Services, these rules have been these guidelines have been significantly backed off on now. So just in terms of the overall map and how it looks county by county, there are 6 counties left in Michigan, just 6. and they and I don't have them off the top of my my head, but if you were to think of the map of Michigan, actually, I'd do it this way, that it's kind of in the Stum region and up in the Alpena region where there are still some counties where they have those recommendations, and but all the rest of Michigan, even the health departments, are not recommending masks, and the protocols for exposures and so forth have been backed way off. Now, as a practical matter, this is kind of, I would say, affirmation, or it's an indication that the government is kind of following suit with where people already are, and so it's not I wouldn't expect that this would be a big change, but this is another signal to me that this is done, that there isn't going to be another set of rules that come along behind it when the public health department of the state of Michigan comes out and says, hey, you don't need to wear masks, and they're using this opportunity of a low point in infections. I think it becomes less likely that even if we do have some other kind of variant or some other kind of wave, that the reaction to that will look very different than it has in the past. A little bit of speculation on my part, but I really, when I see the way that pretty much everybody has responded to this Omicron wave coming down to very low numbers, it tells me that they really do want to lock in a new and different approach for the future. So masks no longer recommended at even licensed child care centers or enrichment programs, which was one of the places that they had held on to it for the longest. But if you're in healthcare, not only is there a reminder, or not a recommendation, but there still are healthcare regulations. So it makes sense to know your industry, and whether or not public transit is another one where there's still regulations that require the practices. But for the rest, it's really backed off on. One other thing, I have been kind of leaning on MIOSHA, who does workplace safety, to say something about this, to acknowledge this in some way, because they have been relying on the general duties obligation and writing tickets based on the general duties obligation over the last few years within the OSHA statute, which is different than what the public health department makes their decisions based on. And so what I'm hoping for, and what I've been leaning and requesting over the last couple of weeks, as we see public health move in this direction, we need OSHA to acknowledge and affirm that for employers. So I don't think that they're out now still doing doing inspections and writing tickets. So I think in practice they've already gotten there, but we need them to say it. And so we'll keep on them about following suit with the public health departments that are moving away from these recommendations and saying, okay, the public health recommendations have been significantly changed. Employers, you will not be expected to go beyond what is even recommended in case you get an inspection or a complaint or something of that nature. So a little bit more work to do in the government agencies. They do kind of work in silos. We think of state government as being one big organization, but really it's a collection of dozens of organizations under one umbrella, and they can be very siloed in how they work. So for the first time in a while, it seems like the public health people are maybe a little further advanced on this than the workplace safety folks.
And we do have a link to the new updated MDHHS guidance that we'll share in the comments and on Facebook too, so you can check it out for yourself. So we're around the 2-year mark of the midst of schools closing and then following by workplaces closing and having our shutdown orders. But with this new guidance, and then there's also news around the world and the US that just shows continued loosening of restrictions. So what can we take away from that?
I've typically looked in terms of trying to predict where things are going in the future, especially for Michigan. I look at other states that have whose governors are Democrats, just because, generally speaking, there's certain other states that our state tended to move pretty closely aligned to. Now, Michigan moved away from the rules. Actually, it's been a while now since we've had restrictions on gatherings and so forth. But there are several states that were still holding on to requirements. For example, in schools in California, today is the first day in a very long time. I think it's been 2 years that kids in schools weren't required to wear masks. So we saw on the East Coast, or on the West Coast, but also on the East Coast in New York, a lot of the rules with respect to vaccination requirements to participate in society and go to things, that those have been backed off. And then looking across the pond over in Europe, even as you see we'll talk about the numbers in a minute, kind of a complicated future for them in Europe with respect to their overall COVID experience. We see France and Germany and Italy and these places that had more rules and restrictions, and in the UK, which has been on again, off again with restrictions, backing off on theirs too. And I know in America, it seems like we've already been kind of back to normal, if you will, in so many different ways. But in different parts of the country and different parts of the world, that hasn't been the case, but it is now. It gives me even that much more confidence that this change, this particular drop in the Omicron conditions is different, and that the risk of infection, the risk of virus and the complications that come along with it, the response to that will be different in the future. And these responses are made by people in elected office, politicians. They're accountable to people. And so I think really this is that people, regular people, have kind of sent a message of here's what they expect for the future. And the Western world across the board seems to be moving away, which tells me that it is different. We're kind of on the tail end of that phase, and now I don't think that we'll go back to it, regardless of what happens in terms of numbers in the future. Going back to the same strategies in the past. If even France is moving away, and even California and even New York are moving away from that, it makes me feel that much more confident that those strategies are in the past for us here in Michigan, and moving forward in the future, hopefully a more predictable environment.
All right, so you talked about the numbers, and it is Monday, so let's dive into our Data Monday discussion.
So here are the numbers for the United States as a whole. So you see this Omicron wave, which was a lot more in terms of total infections than what we had seen in the past, but a milder experience with this virus. It just got to more people. This big wave, we'll talk about why in a little while, but the fact that we had a really big wave that all went through most of the country at about the same time is really going to provide us some additional protection as compared to some other places around the world. Here's the regional lines in terms of the overall average cases per 100,000 people. And you'll see that no matter which region you're looking at around the country, they didn't move exactly in unison, but pretty darn close. And so you see even the kind of straggler that was a little bit high for a while. Idaho is coming down, and so the size of this wave has provided, in addition to the vaccine-related immunity, just a population-wide immunity that's a little different than other places that didn't experience an Omicron wave as big as we did, and it all at the same time. In terms of hospitalizations, again, this is nationwide. See the numbers continue to come down. The daily numbers continue to be a little bit less than the 7-day average, and therefore I expect this to continue to come down. So both ICUs and total hospitalization pretty low, not quite as steep. It comes down a little slower than the infection curve, but looking pretty good. And then in the most serious of outcomes, death, you see that these numbers are continuing to come down nationwide as well. So here's Michigan's numbers. Now in Michigan, we have a very steep decline, and getting down to numbers that look like late last summer. And there's plenty of signs that it'll get even lower. And if you look last year, that this is a new experience first of all for the numbers to go this high, but to drop that low and that quickly, and the coinciding with a lot of the recommendations and rule changes. This is really a distinction that I think is going to will prove out in the next few weeks how much population protection that we have. But it's interesting seeing the epidemiologists really express confidence that while there is a subvariant for Omicron, it's not new. It's been around for quite some time, but as we see that kind of threaten other parts of the world, both vaccinations and recent Omicron infections protect well against it, according to what we know today. And the U.S., because we just went through a major wave, might be better positioned than others. Looking at the Michigan ICU and hospitalization numbers, those as well have come down very, very substantially. You see just a fraction of where they were in the first week of January. And so more good news on that front. And then Michigan's overall, with the 7-day average on fatalities, you'll see there's a downward trend. The scale on this one gets kind of messed up. It looks pretty flat, but the reason it looks flat is because since the state doesn't report, this gives the actual dailies on it, and you see how tall these numbers are daily. But in some cases, they're 2 and 3 days worth of data. That so the scale of the map makes it look like the numbers have come down less than they actually have. So just looking around the world, I wanted to share with you a couple of other places. The United Kingdom and Germany are these first two that I wanted to share. And the reason I wanted to share that is because both hit a bottom, and unlike the U.S., we hit these types of numbers and started to go down again. Theirs have started some modest increases. So both Germany and the United Kingdom had decreases, and then now are kind of an upswing. This upswing does appear to be driven by that new subvariant of Omicron, but their Omicron waves were not as big as the United States. And that's why I think epidemiologists have more confidence that the United States is not, our population has more recent and more relevant immunity because of that than some of the other places that did not experience such a big wave before. So it's hard to say or to tell, is this going to be some kind of a big trend in Europe, or is this just kind of a blip that they'll hang out there for a while and go back down? We shall see. Same for Italy. Now, it wasn't true in France though, but France does have, they're just loosening up some restrictions now, but they also had about 80% of the population is vaccinated. So France is among the highest in terms of vaccination immunity anywhere in the world, and their numbers are kind of defying the trends that are happening in a lot of the rest of Europe. But you can see here in Italy, those numbers have gone up. It's captured my attention. So this is something I'll watch for you over the next month to see whether or not this is a blip or something that we need to watch closer at. And then this last one is China. So as you look with China, you'll see this. See how sharp this increase looks. But I want to make sure you look over here at the number of cases. 3,000 cases. That's all. So it's really an increase. There's like 1.3 billion people in China. 3,000 cases is all they're reporting. And it's been down, around 100 cases for a lot of the pandemic. Whereas look in Italy at the top of this wave, it was 200,000 cases. So that's really something. 200,000 cases here is the scale. This is 3,000. So it just shows you how small their numbers are, but it doesn't jibe with the with some of what we're hearing about hospitalizations and overcrowding and stress in the healthcare system there. I've never really believed that China was reporting everything. Here's a look at China for the entire pandemic. So you'll see that the highest they ever got in February of 2020 was around 3,000 cases. But again, it's just their healthcare systems were really overrun at that time. It doesn't make sense that it was that low ever. But the reason I share this though is because as we look at, we had kind of a difficult time period over the last several months with respect to a slow moving Delta wave and then a really big Omicron wave, and the whole country kind of for the first time during the pandemic moving at the same time, and a lot of infections. Other countries that really don't have that recent and that relevant of immunity, in other words, their recent infections and immunities weren't so highly concentrated in a recent variant, they're a little bit more vulnerable. That doesn't mean to say that letting a virus run wild is a good thing to do. Please do not interpret it that way. But it's the reason why there's more confidence, I think, today among the policymakers in saying, yeah, we see what's happening in Europe, we see what's happening in China, and numbers are rising there. But the overall estimates that we have with population kind of herd immunity is such that we feel more secure that our population is better suited, and why you don't see really anybody across the policy-making spectrum saying, hey, maybe we're going to have to go back to some of these things. They're continuing down the path of loosening things up. And then, of course, we got an election coming up, and people usually make their final decisions on who to vote for based on how they're feeling about the economy. And I don't think any of the political people want to be tied to things that are going to slow down the economy. And therefore, I think their interest and our interest as an association who looks out for the best interests of small businesses, that those interests are now aligned. And I'm feeling pretty confident, in spite of the fact that it does look like around the world that things might get a little bit more complicated there. I think we're still going to be okay here, at least as it pertains to the unpredictable nature of historical workplace safety rules, restrictions, and closures of the past.
All right. Well, before we go and get back to today's workshop, I just wanted to let everyone know that a few weeks ago, SBAM hit 30,000 members. And it's a big milestone for our organization. And to celebrate this week, we are actually doing a membership sale. So if you are not a member, you could join today. If you are a member, but maybe are considering upgrading to a different level, you can do that as well. And both new and upgraded members can save 30% this week only. So I just want to make a little plug for SBAM and the great work that we do on behalf of our members. If you're interested, you can email membership@sbam.org and we'll direct you to the right person. So hope everyone has a great week, and we'll see you back here on Thursday.
Thanks, everybody. See you on Thursday.